Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Maura McCauley. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Homeless and Domestic Violence Services at the Department of Family and Support Services. Welcome to the DFSS Homeless Services Division RFP Technical Assistance webinar. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Thomas Mose to talk a little bit about housekeeping.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, my name's Tom Mose. I work at the Department of Family Support Services and provide technical assistance in the GoToWebinar format for all the divisions. And just wanted to go over a couple housekeeping items today. So due to the volume of the participants, everyone has been placed on mute, but we'd love to hear and take your questions. So in your dashboard, on the right-hand side of your screen, you can submit them via the question box. And we're going to respond to your questions after going through all the slides. Please use the question box to notify us of any technical issues. Usually that can be with your sound, depending if you're hearing through your computer audio or through your phone call. And I'll try to address those with you throughout the presentation. And just lastly, this session is being recorded. We will have the recording available, and also the PowerPoint presentation will be made available, and we'll go over how that will be shared with everybody throughout this RFP process. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to the team and let them walk you through the rest of the presentation. Thanks.
Great. So in terms of what we'll cover today, I'm joined by members of our Homeless Services Division leadership team and colleagues who are helping to manage the overall RFP process at DFSS, and they will introduce themselves as they begin their portions of the webinar. But we'll touch on an overview of the Department of Family and Support Services and our commitment to outcomes. And then we will go through all of the program models that are included in the Homeless Services Division RFP this cycle, which consists of system coordination, program models, and then homeless services and shelter program models. Towards the end, we will talk through technical assistance and guidance for applicants that is general to the RFP process, but then also specific to Procurement, which is the online application tool that the city uses for RFPs. And finally, as Tom mentioned, we will break for questions at the end. Next slide. So there are 7 program divisions within DFSS, and in this presentation, we will focus on the Homeless Services Division. There are several other DFSS divisions that have RFPs out in this cycle, and in the email that went out to all of our delegates and potential vendors, there was a link to the full booklet that includes all of the RFPs across program divisions at DFSS and other city departments that are included in this cycle. So I encourage you to take a look at the resources either on the DFSS website or the city's website for more information about other divisions. Next slide. So DFSS formed in 2009 as a merger of 5 departments. We've recently refreshed our mission, and it really focuses on working with community partners to connect Chicago residents and families to resources that build stability, support their well-being, and empower them to thrive. In terms of our priorities, we are very focused on delivering and supporting high quality and innovative services that help us achieve our mission. All of our work is done in collaboration with community partners, either as delegate agencies or as thought partners and providers in the work, sister agencies and other public officials, to create systemic change and towards the goal of improving Chicagoans' lives. We also focus on informing the public of the resources that are available to them through DFSS and our community partners to really make sure that Chicagoans understand and have access to resources that they might need to support them. And then finally, one of our big priorities is being good stewards of the resources that we manage, making sure that they're being procured and used responsibly and effectively. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the team to take you through the rest of the webinar. Christine?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christine Riley. I'm the Director of Homeless Prevention, Policy, and Planning with the Homeless Services Division here at DFSS. As Maura stated, the goal of DFSS has been, over the last few years, is a commitment to outcomes. So as you can see on this slide, and some of you may know that DFSS, we launched phase 1, the strategic framework, in early 2016 to transition our department to a more outcome-oriented, data-driven approach for delivering services. At its heart, the strategic framework is about placing greater focus on the quality of services and client progress, which are our outcomes, as opposed to the number of clients or units of service delivered or output. The first phase of our strategic framework was internal, and we focused on setting priorities and outcomes ourselves for the department and making them a core part of our work. In 2018, we moved to the second phase of the strategic framework and incorporated this into our contracting and engaging you, our service provider community, to improve our outcomes. The large majority of DFSS work is now achieved through partnerships with service providers in the community. So unless our outcome goals are embedded in our partnerships, we won't be able to achieve results. So our working with you is very important. We have developed these RFPs and contracts that are more focused on outcome goals. And we are now in phase 3 and working to implement a performance improvement system to prioritize and execute efforts and improve results, and developing phase 4, which is system coordination, to improve service matching and referral and linking data to improve client experience and outcomes. Next slide, please. You will see that our strategic contracting work reflected in our RFPs, and 2 in selection criteria, and 3 are application questions for the CDGA process across DFSS. We have continued to refine our RFPs and contracts. So we want to use our RFPs to focus on outcomes. We want to share our priorities and plan for tracking performance improvement, and create a better flow of information on best practices, high quality services, and what we know about the population we're trying to serve. We have continued to focus more on outcome goals and less on activities. We made sure, making sure that selection criteria and application questions reflect our priorities. And we ask questions that give us better, more specific information on funding decisions. And you will also see our continued commitment to partnership and aligning with the COC on important priorities for the whole system. We align with Chicago Plan 2.0 and the Continuum of Care program models. We advance the core values of Chicago's homeless services continuum, including the housing first approach, harm reduction strategies and policies, trauma-informed systems of care, importance of relationship building, respect for cultural competence and non-discriminatory practices, flexible program participant-driven and strengths-based service delivery, developmentally appropriate services, for example, for families or youth, use of evidence-based practices. We also maintain an overall system capacity, which are beds, and ensure there's a continuum of services that can respond to the scale and variety of needs. We support continued implementation of an improvement of coordination around the coordinated entry system, system-wide. Working with members of the teams in the COC implementation work groups to generate and test ideas and encourage partnership, collaboration, and coordination. And we're also focused on performance measurement and learning from our data to support continuous improvement in services. We work to refine our performance measurement framework and approach, and we also seek your input on these metrics. Working together through our active contract management structure, which some of you have participated in, and communicating more frequently about performance and using data to improve throughout the life of the contract. We hope and we try to create a space for learning. We know that all of you have unique strengths and bring something different to the continuum of services, and we appreciate that. We want to learn more about these strengths and your ability to serve the special populations that you are working with or address distinct needs. We want to make sure that we ask new questions and create a space for you to share your innovative ideas. Next slide, please. DFSS RFPs articulate what we want to achieve for Chicagoans, rather than focusing on activities alone. Our RFPs make sure that outcome goals are front and center. And this isn't just about focusing, as I stated, on activities, but what we want you to do and focusing on what we're trying to achieve together for the people that we serve. We want to look at the target populations, the context, and our outcome goals in this effort. Next slide, please. Our selection criteria is focused on results and best practices. You can see the names of the evaluation criteria in the middle of each RFP, including the criteria and scoring in depth. Our application questions also reflect all of this and help us gather information to make good decisions. So you'll see some new questions and it should have a fresh look. This year, based on applicant and evaluator survey feedback, we have focused more on clearly describing program expectations and priorities for improvement. Additionally, given events over this past year, we have reviewed all of our RFPs to integrate a greater focus on equity and lessons learned about service delivery during the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide, please. Next, we're going to transition into talking more about our division's RFPs. First, we're going to review the system coordination RFP. Then we're going to move into homeless services and then to shelter RFPs. So as you can see, under system coordination roles, we have coordinated entry, frequent users of service engagement, which is FUSE, rapid rehousing, rental assistant program manager, and then under direct services programs, we have engagement services, homelessness prevention assistance program, permanent supportive housing support services, youth transitional housing, and then we'll discuss shelters. Next slide, please. So coordinated entry system facilitator RFP. We are seeking one lead agency to provide coordinated entry, outreach coordination, and system facilitation. The goal of this program is to ensure that all people experiencing a housing crisis have fair and equal access to the service system, and that people who need assistance most receive it in a timely manner. Priorities include improved speed of match to housing, continue to support implementation of the coordinated entry system and the temporary prioritization plan put out in response to COVID-19, and following the guidance of the Chicago Department of Public Health. We want to decrease the length of homelessness by reducing time from identification to assessment, to match, and then to housing. And we wanted to align with the COC priorities and oversight. An additional component of this RFP is the outreach coordination. In the previous RFPs, these were two separate components. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, DFSS, we have consolidated the two current program models. Again, we're seeking one lead agency, but we are encouraging collaborative applications with subcontractors who will fulfill the required activities. Please note that the funding amount for both roles, outreach coordination and system facilitation, was consolidated into one anticipated award. This change does not repeat or decrease in DFSS's commitment to fund the coordinated entry system. So again, we feel that consolidating this role will better make better connections for the clients in which we're serving and create better partnerships and working relationships with our system partners. Again, we're seeking collaborative applications, and a successful application would include a lead agency with a clear involvement of input from other entities and agencies. So again, can't stress enough how we are looking for collaborative applications. We say this throughout this webinar, but we just want to let you know, you don't have to go through this alone. If you feel that you can't, please feel free to work with organizations to make this possible. Next slide, please. The next RFP is Frequent User Service Engagement, or FUSE as we call it. The goal of FUSE program is to engage vulnerable homeless families who are frequent users of the shelter system to help them transition into more stable housing and prevent further episodes of homelessness. This transition is achieved through intensive case management and clinical services. Please note that these intensive case management services are on top of the case management that's already taking place in your own shelter system, in your own family shelter systems. But we want to make sure there's some additional help to help families manage and navigate their housing barriers and support meeting the needs of the family. This program is targeted to serve families who are frequent users in the system, and this is defined as 3 or more shelters within the past 12 months. And it also targets families who may be at risk of discharge from interim housing programs, from shelter programs. Also, we are looking for one agency who will serve as a lead agency and provide training support and coordination for shelters, service providers serving these families. Priorities include to continue to improve services for the most vulnerable families and reduce incidents of returns to homelessness. Improve the process of identification and referral of families that fit the population criteria, as well as provide TA to shelter providers to reduce negative discharges. Next slide, please. Again, the guidance for this RFP, we're seeking one lead agency, but as I stated before, we encourage collaborative applications with subcontractors who will fulfill the required activities as needed. Next slide, please. Rapid Rehousing Program Coordinator RFP. We're seeking one agency to play a critical coordination role and administration role for the Rapid Rehousing Program. The goal of Rapid Rehousing is to quickly transition people experiencing homelessness to permanent housing, preventing shelter entrance and future instability. This agency will coordinate and manage the Rapid Rehousing Program across Chicago, coordinate with landlords, administer financial assistance, provide relocation services, and conduct data collection, evaluation, and other administrative activities associated with the program. Priority for us here is decreasing wait time, the number of days it takes for households to move into their units through rapid rehousing. We would like to work closely with the selected agency to improve this. Additionally, we want to improve access to income through benefits and targeted employment resources so Chicagoans in rapid rehousing can remain stably housed. The applicant must also ensure a portfolio of services for domestic violence victims. So as you can see on your screen, we have a service overview, and it talks about the target population as well. Next slide, please. Once again, we are seeking one lead agency to coordinate the administration of financial assistance and provide rapid rehousing services. But we encourage collaborative applications with subcontractors who can fulfill required service activities. We cannot say this enough, and you'll hear it again. Next slide, please. We have the Rental Assistance Program Manager RFP. The goal of RAP is to reduce the number of Chicagoans who ultimately become homeless by quickly providing those at risk of losing their current rental housing with short-term financial assistance. DFSS is seeking one agency to play a critical administrative role in dispersing rental assistance payments in collaboration with DFSS's network of 6 community service centers. This program manager is responsible for quickly providing rental assistance payments, housing inspections, payment to property owners or managers, and monitoring fiscal activities and other administrative activities. Case management and application processing is performed by our community service center staff. It's not a function of this RFP. Our priority is to improve real-time reporting on fiscal management of financial assistance and the completion of virtual in-person housing ability inspections in a timely manner. This is very crucial. We want to make sure once a person is approved, the inspections are made and that they can move into their new apartment. Next slide, please. Also, with the RAP, the guidance for the RAP RFP is administered through city corporate and federal emergency solution grant funds. So all relevant guidelines and requirements of the funding must be met. Successful programs must address DFSS priorities for the coming contract period, include improving, again, real-time reporting, monthly and weekly reporting of financial assistance, the completion of virtual and in-person inspections, and addressing the challenges in monitoring expenditures, which I stated before. So please note that we will be adhering to the corporate guidelines, funding guidelines, as well as ESG guidelines. Next slide, please. Engagement Services RFP has a new name this year. It used to be Outreach and Engagement Services. This year, we're calling it Engagement Services, and it covers 3 program models: Street Outreach, Drop-in Centers, and Housing System Navigator. The 3 program models share a high-level goal to provide service connections for very vulnerable Chicagoans experiencing homelessness that result in an increase in the number of people who are assessed, accept services, and successfully move to more stable housing. And of course, this more stable housing can include shelter. So with the, along with the programs that serve the general target population, DFSS is seeking applicants that can specialize in the following areas: public transit or airports, youth, the ability to provide services in Polish and Spanish, and overnight street outreach. So for street outreach, we want to make sure the applicants and the respondent provide mobile connections to services and benefits for people experiencing unsheltered homelessness. For drop-in centers, it's an indoor space, again, assisting those who are experiencing homelessness and providing case management and other resources. Some drop-in centers may have laundry, some may have showers or connections to other services. With Housing System Navigator, these are helping those who may have significant barriers who've been matched to housing through the coordinated entry system and making sure they stay connected with them along this journey of being housed and providing additional services to them while they're moving into housing. Next slide, please. These program models also share key improvement priorities. We want to increase the number of individuals who accept services and are successfully moved to more stable housing. And we also want to ensure that the most vulnerable people living on the street or in shelter can be successfully matched to a housing provider and have access to the support needed to help them stay connected and address any barriers as they navigate their way to a successful housing placement. Next slide, please. So the Engagement Services RFP guidance, we want to make sure that there's one, so you can apply, if you're applying for more than one program model within this RFP, you should submit separate applications for each program model. We want to make sure that's clear, so I'll repeat it. If you're applying for this for more than one model in this RFP, please submit separate applications. Also, agencies administering multiple projects within one program model may include all projects in the same application. So if you have multiple street outreach programs or multiple drop-in centers, you can include those in one application. But if you want to apply for 3 different models, you must submit different applications. For all models, program models, successful programs must have strategies in place to address the barriers faced by people experiencing homelessness, and an engagement strategy that supports and encourages people to move into shelter or housing. Sometimes we know that engaging people and offering shelter cannot be an easy feat, but we want you to make sure that you continue addressing them and developing strategies to possibly get them to make that next step. Next slide, please. Next, we're going to talk about Homeless Prevention Assistance Program RFP. The goal of this program is to provide a range of services that prevent Chicagoans at risk of losing their housing from becoming homeless. We talked about the RAP manager role before, which focused on rental disbursements from our community service centers. With this program, we intend the funds to fund a broader range of activities across multiple agencies. This program model covers a range of services, including financial assistance, legal representation, housing stabilization, and relocation assistance. Please note that this funding does not include direct financial assistance, but linkage to financial assistance is required. Key priorities for DFSS with this RFP is to improve performance of the programs by increasing the percentage of households that receive support who maintain their housing up to and beyond 1 year after intervention, as well as address challenges associated with the pandemic, including increased housing instability and using technology to provide remote services if needed. Next slide, please. Next, we have permanent supportive housing support services, including Safe Havens RFP. This RFP covers a set of critical supportive services that are focused on ensuring people with different needs maintain housing stability. The permanent supportive housing services, including Safe Havens RFP, funds the supportive services, but not the rental subsidies. I'm going to say that again. This RFP funds the supportive services, but not the rental subsidies. The RFP includes two major categories of supportive services. The first is traditional PSH supportive services, which provides services in a variety of different housing settings. And two, Safe Havens, a more specialized open stay and on-demand model for a distinct target population of chronically homeless people with severe mental illness or dual diagnosis. The first category of PSH support services includes two subcategories. We have ongoing special initiatives and long-term rental assistance programs. Ongoing special initiatives include the Ending Veterans Homelessness Initiative, Frequent User Service Engagement Initiative, the CPS Family and Transition Program, Homeward Bound and Chronic Homelessness Pilot, and then we have the COC Supportive Housing Initiative Program. This year, new to this RFP, we have included Transition Age Youth, or TAY, and other youth PSH programs. If previously your agency has applied for TAY or other youth PSH programs, please note that these programs will be now funded under this umbrella of the PSH RFP. With long-term rental assistance programs, they provide supportive services to units that have subsidies funded through the COC's LTRA program. And also the second category of this RFP is Safe Havens. The program model is meant to serve chronic homeless individuals who are hard to engage with severe mental illness and other chronic conditions that impair the ability to achieve housing stability. Persons residing in Safe Havens have been living unsheltered and may have previously been unwilling or unable to participate in services. Under this category, DFSS seeks a respondent to provide safe and non-intrusive living environments in which skilled staff members work to engage persons in housing and needed services. Safe Havens have no limit of length of stay. The general target population for PSH includes HUD Category 1, which is literally homeless individuals or families. HUD Category 2 is individuals and families fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, violence, sexual assault, stalking, or other dangerous or life-threatening conditions that relate to violence against the individual or family member. For this RFP, the target population may vary by special initiative, and you can please refer to the RFP when it's released for more details. Next slide, please. All permanent supportive housing programs have the same performance metrics. Safe Havens have their own performance metrics that reflects the high service need of this population, as you can see from your screen. Next slide, please. The long-term rental assistance cap. DFSS originally served as a grantee for HUD LTRA PSH funding. But following changes in the HUD guidance in 2016, we transferred grants directly to delegate agencies and continue to fund a portion of the services match for some of these programs. For the remaining LTRA agencies receiving DFSS PSH funds, we will begin reducing funds through a funding cap with the longer-term goal of no longer funding services for LTRA programs as we align funding for this portfolio to city-led special initiatives. We will do this over time and in coordination with the COC. For current providers with questions about which bucket they fit in, please reach out to us for clarification. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Hi, Christine. This is Tom.
Okay, I see.
What slide do you want to be on?
I'm on 27 now. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. The goal of youth transitional housing, youth transitional housing RFP. The goal of youth transitional housing is to quickly house young people experiencing the housing instability while providing the developmentally appropriate support needed for them to remain stably housed and build a foundation for success in the future. Key priorities include that program design, staffing structure, policies, and organizational structure which embrace authentic youth collaboration. And when we talk about authentic youth collaboration, this is the practice of meaningfully involving youth in decisions that affect them, their peers, and communities. Youth voice is so important in this effort. Young people who are receiving services should be encouraged to participate in decisions that directly impact their housing and their well-being. Systems and programs should have means to actively listen to the opinions of youth and young adults with the intention of creating solutions based on their feedback. Serving the broadest range of households that meet the COC's definition is a part of this in defining youth, and also housing youth quickly. This RFP is only for youth transitional housing programs. Youth low threshold shelter applications should be submitted under the shelter RFP. And youth permanent supportive housing applications should be submitted under the permanent supportive housing support services RFP. So again, this RFP, which is youth transitional housing, is only for youth transitional housing programs, not shelter and not for PSH. Next slide, please. So again, through this RFP, agencies may only apply for youth transitional housing. You can apply, those who want to apply for youth transitional housing, multiple ones, may include multiple projects in one proposal. And successful programs must have a program design that incorporates best practices of youth choice, self-determination, and also have that sense of authentic youth collaboration incorporated into the program's design. This is very, very important. Next slide, please. And now I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Kim, who's going to talk to you about shelter.
Thanks, Christine. Hi, everyone. This is Kim Howard. I'm a project manager with the Homeless Services Division. And last but not least, I will be talking us through the shelter RFP. So overall, the goal of the shelter system is to support households experiencing homelessness in moving to appropriate and stable permanent housing while providing them a safe and accessible place to stay. Overall, DFSS seeks to fund an array of shelters that can meet the needs of a diverse group of households experiencing homelessness in Chicago. And so while there will be sort of variety in shelter programs, overall, all shelters should be providing a safe environment and meeting basic needs, so including food, showers, limited storage, engaging in diversion efforts, providing a connection to housing options by supporting clients in completing the coordinated entry assessment, and in identifying and navigating other housing options. and providing access to case management to ensure that clients are linked to services and resources that will help them obtain or maintain housing. So that could include helping clients get proper identification, connecting to employment, education, benefits, etc. The target population to be served by shelters are households who are experiencing literal homelessness across a variety of household types, so families with children or single adults, and across specializations. So that could include the survivors of domestic violence, youth, medically vulnerable clients, etc. And the service, sort of the essential elements and requirements of a shelter will depend on sort of that household type and specialization. So for example, there would be additional requirements for shelters serving survivors of domestic violence. In terms of key performance metrics, so these metrics come out of the work in active contract management that DFSS launched with shelter providers a couple years ago, as well as the COC program models chart work group. So overall, sort of key performance metrics include the percent of households who exit shelter to a more stable housing destination or permanent destination, the percent of households who maintain or increase income, and the percent of households with a complete coordinated entry assessment. Performance, we expect, can vary by population served, and so DFSS is really looking for continuous improvement along these metrics and in comparison to peer programs. And we'll also monitor these metrics by race, ethnicity, gender, age, other characteristics as appropriate to track equity in outcomes. Next slide, please. So there are a couple priorities in the shelter RFP that we wanted to highlight today. And these priorities are really born from sort of ongoing COC work, active contract management with DFSS current shelter providers, and also issues sort of amplified and elevated by the COVID crisis. So the first priority, certainly not a new one, is improving rehousing outcomes for clients who access shelter. And we know that rehousing outcomes are affected by several factors beyond the control of shelter providers, notably sort of the lack of affordable and appropriate housing. But there are several things that DFSS is really interested in continuing to work with programs on to improve client rehousing outcomes. And so those are making sure that programs are really orienting messaging, staffing, and services all towards housing, rather than sort of focusing on fixing or healing or getting clients housing ready. With that in mind, also approaching sort of length of stay in shelter with an individualized approach. So while we want to minimize the length of time that a family or individual is experiencing homelessness, we also don't want households to be kicked out after a set time period and further destabilized. And so DFSS is really seeking shelter partners who can work with us to track length of stay alongside exits to housing and think creatively about the needs of a population that may be staying longer in shelter. DFSS is also interested in working with shelter providers who can operate as sort of informed and connected members of a broader services sector, knowing that client needs who show up at the door of shelter can be sort of varied and extensive. DFSS is interested in working with shelters who can leverage various partnerships to meet client needs. I think one example during the COVID crisis has been sort of building on this shelter-based services team model developed with the Department of Public Health. DFSS is very interested in working with shelter partners who will sort of actively work with these healthcare partners to offer on-site primary and behavioral healthcare to clients. And lastly, as I've already mentioned, making sure that DFSS is interested in working with shelters who can track client outcomes along with us and focus on continuous improvement. The second priority we wanted to elevate today was around expanding access to shelter, and there's sort of two pieces I want to clarify today. So first of all, DFSS wants to work with providers to further reduce barriers to entry in our shelter system and to sort of expand the number of beds in the system following a low barrier shelter model. Specifically thinking about connecting more clients who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness to shelter and services. And so low barrier shelters are not new in our system. Many of our youth programs follow a youth low threshold, low barrier model. And there's a low barrier shelter for adults that specifically partners with encampment outreach, allowing pets, allowing clients to enter without curfews or even under the influence of drugs or alcohol, allowing clients to bring in more belongings, allowing couples to stay together. So really reducing sort of the typical barriers that we would see for folks to come inside. We also recognize that adopting these practices means we need sort of sufficient staff and training and resources to make the shelter a safe environment. And so to move this priority forward, DFSS is asking respondents who are currently operating a shelter program for individuals who would be interested in transitioning to sort of more of a low barrier model to submit an additional application for that future state low barrier model that accounts for that higher level of staff and services required. And so these applications can then be considered if additional funding becomes available. So to say that again really quickly, for folks who are already operating a shelter for individuals, if you are interested in transitioning that model to a low barrier shelter program, please submit 2 applications, one as your program is currently in operation, and 2, sort of this future state low barrier model that could be considered if additional funding becomes available. Agencies who are already operating a low barrier shelter do not need to submit 2 applications. Please just submit 1 application that sort of reflects your program and budget as it currently operates. The second piece of expanding access to shelter that we want to call out today is expanding the share of beds that can provide access to beds 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In this case, to move this priority forward, there's sort of one application question where DFSS is asking applicants who are currently operating overnight programs to indicate if you would be interested in expanding to offer services 24/7. So no need to submit sort of a second application for this one. There will just be one question to indicate here. And again, these transitions would be considered if additional funding becomes available. Next slide, please. And so lastly, for shelter, I just wanted to walk through sort of how the shelter RFP is structured this year and how respondents should be submitting applications. So in recent years, DFSS has supported sort of 2 primary types of shelter, one being emergency shelter and the other being interim housing. But in alignment with sort of COC program models, DFSS is transitioning to support these programs under a single shelter program model. Understanding that sort of within this consolidated model, DFSS will continue to support shelter programs that vary in terms of settings, so congregate spaces versus private rooms, in terms of sort of levels and intensity of services, in terms of staffing, all based on sort of the specific needs of the population served. And so to that end, we want applications to indicate by sort of population category and specialization. So before I walk through sort of each of these buckets, I wanted to quickly speak to what we mean by a specialization. And so really what that is if your program is dedicated to serving a specific population that has unique safety or service needs, and that your program is providing staffing and services that are tailored to meet those needs. So for example, staff members are receiving sort of specialized training to meet the needs of that specific population. So the categories that we will ask applicants to submit under is general population for families with children or programs that are serving both families with children and individuals. The second category would be general population just serving individuals. Third is a domestic violence specialization. So again, that your program has sort of unique staffing and services tailored to meet the needs of survivors of domestic violence, and that can be families or individuals. A youth specialization, so programs either serving clients age 18 to 24 or 14 to 24, which can be youth-led families or sort of individual young people. And then a medically vulnerable specialization for families or individuals, or if you feel like your program has another specialization that's not captured here, please feel free to include that in the application. So funding decisions will be made sort of within these categories, and so respondents can submit a separate application for each population category that they're applying to serve. So for example, if your agency is applying to operate one shelter program for families with children and one shelter program for single men, please submit 2 separate applications. But if you're applying to operate sort of 2 shelter programs for families, please feel free to combine that into one application. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to breeze through this one since this was really covered sort of within each program model specifically, but we just wanted to call out that sort of similarly to the previous RFP round, you can submit multiple similar projects in one application. Please sort of review the RFP text for your program model specifically to understand specific guidance there. If you are choosing to submit multiple applications for an RFP, you'll need multiple iSupplier usernames. And really, I think that the guidance here is thinking about your agency and sort of which approach will help you best prepare a strong application and then easily administer the resulting contract for that work. Next slide, please. Okay, and lastly, just to run through a couple sort of overarching pieces of advice for applicants. One, start early, since a few components may be new to you, making sure that you're reading the updated RFP narratives, the selection criteria, application questions closely, to make sure you're sort of preparing the strongest application you can, registering and creating your iSupplier account as soon as possible, and compiling the data that you need early. So this round, we are not requesting for any program models that you're running a report out of HMIS, just given the transition of the HMIS vendor transition this spring and summer. But there will be pieces that are asking for performance data, and so making sure you're compiling the data that you need early to submit. Also, please make sure that you sort of remember to fully answer questions. There is a character limit, so sort of being aware of that and not forgetting to attach any required attachments, and then making sure you're not waiting until the last moment to submit, since late applications won't be accepted. So at this point, I am going to hand off to Julia to walk through a little bit more of the details of the timeline and how to submit applications.
Thank you. Oh, Kim, you covered all of my really important points. So now I'm going to just say them one more time. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you guys for such a great presentation. It's always so informative. The pre-proposal, so here's just your timeline. The pre-proposal webinar is today. You're here, you're present, you're in it. The RFP is going to be released. That means the application questions go live on our e-procurement system. It's a citywide system. It's really fun. It's May 3rd at 9:00 a.m. and the applications are due on the 17th at 12 noon. As Kim indicated, submit, I'm always about submit often. You can always pull your application back if you want to amend it, and start early. As I've said in the prior webinars I've been doing around CDGA this week, there's a lot of applicants. This is the time where you don't want to be the last one, because if you have a question, it's going to be harder to get a hold of us than maybe it normally is. There's 23 different RFPs coming out for, I guess maybe it's 22 different RFPs coming out for DFSS alone, and we're just one of five departments in the city who have RFPs up through CDGA. So really do yourself a favor for your e-procurement, get the glitches ironed out. Talk to us early. This is when you're going to be able to get your stuff in. So I'm going to go over, and then again, our contracts start January 1st on 2022. So that's kind of just a little bit of the timeline. Let's go to the next slide. So this year we're doing something a little bit different with how we're receiving questions. And so I want to go over that, but let me just go through this slide. So as Kim indicated, late applications will not be accepted. So let me just say that one more time. Late applications will not be accepted. We cannot accept a late application. If your application doesn't get in through e-procurement and the RFP closes, you can't, there's no way to get it in there without reopening the entire RFP, having everybody apply who, reapply. So we're very, very hesitant. We're very disinclined to do that. This is why you really want to start early. You want to iron out those details early. You want to submit early. If you want to pull it back and resubmit, that you can do that, but just please, please, please. I can watch. We can watch the applicants rolling in. We can see who's working on what. We're pretty much on top of stuff that way. And so I do know just from doing this for years that most people really don't, they might open an application, but they really don't start going on it, get going on it until probably maybe 4 or 5 days prior to the due date. And for this one, do it early. Just do it early, get it in early. Pretend that the due date is June 14th or June 15th. Really, you'll be much happier. We'll all be happier. And then we'll get to read your good applications. So it's a win-win. This year we're gonna, in regards and kind of in line with the work that we've been doing as a department and as a city about equity and access, we're making the we're changing the way that we answer questions, programmatic questions. You can ask all the e-procurement questions you want. You can talk to me, you can talk to the hotline, and that's in the next couple of bullets. But for programmatic questions, we're really encouraging people to answer their question or post their questions rather in e-procurement. If you can't, you can call Christine, you can call the people who are listed as the program experts on all of the RFPs, this different RFP sheets in the CDGA book, but they are not going to answer your questions. They are going to take your question down, and then we are going to do frequently asked question memos. Those will be posted in the applications themselves. They will be posted on the fabulous DFSS CDGA website, which is a couple bullets down again. And that is how, and that means that everybody's going to get the answers at the same time. Nobody kind of gets an unfair advantage over this. This is much more in line. It feels weird, but it's just because it's new. It's much more in line with how the feds work in terms of their application process and kind of recommended procurement practices around equity and access. So I'm going to encourage everybody to put their questions in through e-procurement. If you want to ask a question, we'll answer the questions at the webinar today. But if you want to ask a question post the webinar, you're either going to call somebody, they're going to take your question down, or you're going to email them and they're going to receive your question, and they'll acknowledge the receipt, but they are not going to answer the question until you'll get the answer as part of an FAQ document that's going to be posted, in one of the two places I mentioned. If you have a question about e-procurement, your life is a little bit perhaps more straightforward, or just maybe what you're used to, there are basically 3 different things you can do. You can email the customer support at cityofchicago.org and get OBM. You can call the e-procurement hotline at 312-744-HELP. That hotline operates only during business hours, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Or you can call or email me. I don't have as high a level of access as OBM does, but I also might be a little bit easier to get a hold of. I do not have all of the departments calling and writing me about their e-procurement issues. I just have you guys. And so I try to, and I tend to, and I'm the fool that answers the phone on Saturdays and Sundays, generally speaking, if you leave a message, whatnot. I do understand that a lot of the grant writing work, especially for smaller agencies, happens on off hours, and so I try to be responsive to that. Not surprisingly, I was also the person who took all of the class pets when my children were little. So there you go. So one of the things that we've done this year that I'm really excited about is the DFSS CDGA website. It's basically a sub website of the DFSS page on the City of Chicago link. That is where we're going to be posting the links to the webinars, YouTube links to webinars if you want to relive this. We're going to be we post information updates. We're going to be posting those FAQ documents. We're probably going to, we're going to be posting all sorts of great stuff. Maybe a CDGA coloring book. Who knows? Maybe that's what we need to do this year. Anyways, so that I really, really, go there, bookmark it, and use it. There also, if you're a person that likes to get your training via video or lots of screenshots, you can go to the training materials and they have documents, they have videos that can teach you how to do some basic stuff about e-procurement. The other thing you can do is you can go to the OBM training assistance webinar, which is tomorrow from 10 to 12. It's on Zoom. You don't need to sign up. You just show up. You click on what I thought was the registration, but it really just takes you right to the actual event. You don't have to do anything except, click a few times and go onto a Zoom call. And after this year, I'm sure we're all good at that. But that's also a great place where they're going to go through all the e-procurement stuff in greater detail than I have time for today. So let's go to the next slide, and we're going to get started on the fascinating task of asking a question in the e-procurement environment. to ask a question in e-procurement, first of all, you're going to have to wait for the applications to go up. So if you have a question between now and May 3rd, when the applications are released on e-procurement, you really need to call those program people or email them with your questions so they can dutifully write stuff down. But after that, you're going to want to do it in e-procurement. And to do that, you're going to need an iSupplier account. So if you don't have an iSupplier account, I say call the hotline now. They'll help you get set up. Takes a couple of days. You fill out a little form and then it takes a couple of days for you to be processed, and then you'll get a link to fill out to start your account. If you're, so that is kind of how that works. So to begin the process of sending a question via e-procurement, so we're like entering the beautiful world of e-procurement, and we're pretending it's May 4th and you have a burning question that you want to ask. So you have your iSupplier account set up, and you are going to ask a question about a specific RFP, as opposed to just a general life question, which e-procurement probably isn't going to be as satisfying with. So to begin the process of sending a question via e-procurement, you're going to need to log into your iSupplier account, and you're going to need to find the RFP you want to ask about. So all of our RFPs, all DFSS RFPs for forevermore, well, or until they change the system, but forevermore for now, is going to be on this e-procurement website. This webinar is going to be, the PowerPoint's going to be posted on the DFSS CDGA website that I was just talking about. The link to this webinar via YouTube, that recording is going to be on the DFSS CDGA website as well. So you don't have to be scribbling this particular not very intuitive web address down. It will be up there shortly. And so when you do that, we're going to go to the next slide, and you're going to see this. This is where it all happens. This is where you can find your particular RFP. You can go, if you go here to the details area and you just want to look at it, you can look at it by clicking on those little eyeglasses, or on, some people think it's an infinity sign, some people think it's an eyeglasses. Whatever, click on it and you'll get to see the bare bones. But you want to log in, so you're going to go to the bottom right hand corner here with this box that says login, and you are going to press login, which is going to take you to this screen on the next slide. So there you go. Look, it's a login screen. So you're going to put in your username, you're going to put in your password. If you've forgotten one of those things, you're going to hit login assistance below the login cancel buttons, and that would take you to reset. Very simple, painless. And then you're going to log in, and you're going to go to once you log in, you're going to go to this screen. You're going to open up the City of Chicago online bidding menu, drop down, and then you're going to open it up further off of sourcing till you get to the sourcing homepage. You're going to click on their sourcing homepage, and you're going to go to this next slide or screen. For this, now this is where you're going to look up your RFQ or RFP. So you're to get the RFQ number, I have it on, it's in this webinar. You'll see in the next slide, which I'm not ready to go to yet. But also, if you look in the CDGA book, they have all of these RFQ numbers. So you're going to go to the search open solicitations, and you're going to say, I want to search by number. Then you're going to take your RFQ number, you're going to type it in that box that says type in RFQ number here, and you're going to hit go. If you had already started something and you want to go back to it, you would just hit one of the things below. So you're going to go hit go. We're going to go to the next slide. And here is a list of all of the RFQ numbers for homeless services, just so that you have them, handy dandy list. Keep them in your wallet or your purse. So this is a list of all the numbers. Again, this is going to all be posted on the DFSS CDGA website, and the numbers are in the CDGA book with the in the title of the different RFPs that we have up there. So moving right along to the next slide, you're going to see, this is what you see. You've searched for your number, you hit go, this is what you get. So here we are in the action, you see all of it's happening in this actions button or actions area on the kind of mid upper right hand side. So to get to the part where you're going to ask a question, you would go to online discussions. But if you wanted to start an application, you would hit the create quote that's right above online discussions. That if you did create quote, that's going to open up the application for you. You're going to see all the questions, you can start your application, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you just want to ask a question, you go to online discussions, click on that, and then hit go, which is sort of obscured by the by the bar. And when you hit go, you're going to get to the next screen on the next slide. And it is there's not a lot to do on this screen except to open a new message. If you had prior messages, they would be below there, but you want a new message. You got new questions. So hit new message. And this is the screen that you're going to get. Exactly. It looks very familiar. I'm sure you've all encountered a screen like this before in your lives. You're going to write in the subject what your question is about. You're going to write in the message what your question is. If for some reason you need to attach something to ask as part of this question, you can attach it because, hey, why not? Or you could just send us good memes, I suppose. And then when you're done, you're going to hit send, and that is it. You are done with asking a question in the e-procurement environment, and we're all just like probably, you know, closer to being our full selves. So that is kind of all I have to say about how to ask a question in e-procurement. We're going to go to the next slide, and now I'm going to remind you that June 17th at noon is when these applications are due. We really want to hear from all of you. We want to read your great ideas, and we want you to submit them before the deadline, because if you can't submit it after the deadline. So this is the part where we're gonna ask questions. So let's see if anybody's asked some questions. Oh yeah, here we go. You guys are good question askers. We're gonna start the questions. I'm gonna read them, and then some of my fabulous and talented homeless division colleagues get to answer them, because if I answered them, I would just be probably making stuff up, and it might be amusing, but it wouldn't be accurate. So here we go. How many people are on the review panel for project selection? That's a new one. So don't all, so how do we want to answer that? I think if you were talking about like your application, I can answer that the review panel is generally, we have 2 readers, sometimes 3 if there's a discrepancy between readers, and then it goes to be approved by several levels. I don't know, Maura, if you want to add to that.
Right. So we're currently forming our cohort of reviewers, but Julie is correct. Each application is read by a pair of reviewers, and then if there's a discrepancy over a certain point threshold between reviewers, we'll bring a 3rd reviewer in. But we typically assign people to read by program model, and that's it in a nutshell.
Great. So thank you. And now here, there's a couple of different questions here about will these slides and or this recording be available to us? How will we get them? Yes, these slides and this recording will be available to you, and they will be available on the DFSS CDGA website. I don't know, like maybe we'll have, if they're really popular, I'm tempted to do a t-shirt, but that's where it's going to be. Then here's another, also, where are the RFP guidelines at? I would refer to the CDGA book, which is available at the DFS CDGA website, but also on OBM's website. It was included in a link that you probably received about this webinar. And the book is going to have the most comprehensive guidelines for everything. Maura, again, is there anything more housekeeping that you want to add?
No, I will put the link in the chat so that it's easily accessible.
Perfect. That is awesome. Thank you so much. So will tracking of SOAR legal or education/training referrals be looked at?
Hi, this is Kim. I think this question came in specifically around the shelter RFP. I'm so happy to chime in on this one. So overall, the performance metrics that I shared today on the webinar are the sort of access to housing and sort of key metrics, but DFS also reserves the right to sort of request additional metrics and to work with providers throughout the course of the contract to figure out what are the key metrics we want to be tracking, and to have conversation around those. And so other metrics that we specifically call out in the RFP are sort of the number of, number of households with complete coordinated entry assessments, the number of households who increase income potentials. I think that's what this question was partially getting at, and bed utilization. But again, interested in sort of working with shelter partners to identify what are the other key metrics that we want to be looking at to improve outcomes for our clients.
Great. So what are your considerations? What are you considering a low barrier shelter? So
that's another very good question. and the RFP has a little bit more detail here, but to speak to this quickly, I think overall, we want sort of all shelter programs to be operating with sort of as low barrier as possible, and specifically we're interested in sort of reducing some of the barriers that are sort of most commonly identified for folks coming off the street or unsheltered locations. And so that can include sort of allowing couples to stay together, allowing pets, removing curfews, accepting people who are under the influence of drugs or alcohol.
There you go. And then how will the data be tracked with HMIS vendor transition?
Yes, so this was definitely something that came up, knowing there's a sort of overlap in timelines with the system HMIS vendor transition and the CDGA process. So as I said earlier, we're not asking any programs to download an HMIS ART report and submit as part of this application as we have in previous rounds. But there are still places where we're asking for performance data. And so I would advise to look at the specific RFP, see what data, if any, is being requested, and make sure that at a sort of program level that you have pulled that data out of HMIS or ahead of the transition and ahead of submitting.
So we operate 2 shelters, one for intact families and the other shelter for families and single women. Do I need to submit 2 applications?
Yeah, so I answered this one in the chat, but the quick answer is, given that both of these shelters are serving families, this could be submitted under sort of that first category of general populations, families with children or families with children and individuals. But I think one thing to call out here is this agency could submit for those one application for both of those shelters, or if it's better from an agency perspective, they could also submit 2 separate applications. So I think at that point, it's really to think through what makes the most sense in terms of putting together a strong application, and then what makes the most sense in terms of managing the contract and budget, whether the agency would prefer to have that sort of under one contract for multiple sites or a separate contract for each.
So in that vein, I see another question that's our emergency shelter and interim shelter is considered 2 populations and need 2 separate applications. So the emergency shelter was age 18 to 24, the interim shelter is 14 to 24, and are those considered 2 populations, and do they need to have 2 separate applications?
So in that case, since both of those population categories are youth, that could be either one application for both sites or 2 separate applications if the agency feels that they could put together a stronger application with 2 separate responses.
Okay, and then it says, we currently have 3 POs for our DV shelter, all for the same program. Are these going to be combined now?
Great, so these are all really great examples. So this, the same answer applies for this one too, though. Since this is all sort of one specialization of domestic violence, this is an agency choice of whether they want to submit one application for 3 DV shelters, or whether they want to submit a separate application for each of those programs.
And then here, just breaking it up, it says, it's our first time in e-procurement. Do we click the login assistance to set up a username and password? And the answer is no. You should call the helpline at 312-744-HELP, H-E-L-P, to get yourself set up with an iSupplier account. And so that is the way that you need to, I know it's not entirely intuitive, but that is the way. So call the helpline and they will help you get set up with an iSupplier account. Back to housing homelessness questions. Can agencies apply for new permanent shelter PSH support service projects? If so, would this be on the same application as the current renewal projects or on a separate application? So that's. Christine or Maura?
Yeah, so we're not funding new initiatives. So any new applications need to fit under the categories that are outlined in the RFP. This is just part of a process of getting this program model strategically organized.
Great. So here we have, there's a couple of e-procurement questions. It says, I'm searching for the RFP in view only mode, but if I search by number, nothing is coming up. If you're doing what I think you are doing, it is because the RFP has not been posted yet on e-procurement. So that won't happen. You will not be able to find it until May 3rd. So that is why nothing is coming up. And because in fact, there is nothing posted to come up. The second question here is, can we save our application and come back to it? Yes, you can. You can save your application and you can come back to it in e-procurement. It's one of the beautiful things about e-procurement. You can even submit your application and then pull it back if you decide you need to do something else. You can keep on doing that as many times as you want until the deadline. After the deadline, it's gone. But until then, you can save, you can come back, you can submit, you can pull back. It's super awesome that way. It says, here we go. Am I correct to understand that there needs to be a different iSupplier user ID for each application? If so, if one person is submitting multiple applications for an agency, is it okay for that to have multiple applicant accounts? Carrie, or I'm trying to remember who discussed that, because you did a great job. I think it was either Chris or Kim. Can everybody hear you? I'm not hearing anybody speaking.
Hi, Julie. Can you hear me now?
I can.
Great. So I think the guidance that we gave is that if you choose to submit multiple applications for an RFP, you'll need multiple iSupplier usernames. But perhaps this is something we can follow up with more detail on in an FAQ.
Yeah, you do need different iSupplier usernames, but my understanding is that you can actually use the same email address for each iSupplier account. I'm going to jump down here in that somebody said, what is the difference between an e-procurement account and an iSupplier account? iSupplier is the platform on which applicants have an account in which to interface with e-procurement, which is the city's platform in which all of the contractual and finance stuff lives. So you need an iSupplier account. That's your key. That's your identity to interface with e-procurement. The same way that you need like an avatar, right, to interface or play a game. So I hope that clears it up. Here we have, will there be budget guidance in the RFP relative to our current funding levels, i.e. how much can we increase the budget request? Great question.
So in the RFP book, you'll see the range of awards by program model. And, you know, for many, typically the Homeless Services Division budget has remained level with, modest increases over the last few years. But we really encourage you to apply for what it will cost you to provide the services that you're applying for. So think through what you're including in your proposal and what the budget would be in order to deliver on those services in your applications. But the general ranges are included towards the end of each program model in the RFP book.
Great. Thank you. So for the permanent supportive housing support services, are the funds for services and subsidies or just services? Hello?
Services, the permanent housing with the permanent housing support services program model only funds the supportive services. It does not fund the subsidies in permanent supportive housing.
Okay, thank you. Here we are with, we currently have multiple awards for one of our programs. Is this a decision that is made after the application is approved, or are these RFPs for a specific funding source only?
This is Kim. These are decisions that are made after the application is approved on specifically which funding sources will be assigned to each application. And so there's sort of not a way to exclusively apply for a specific funding source.
And then here, am I eligible to apply to this RFP if my nonprofit was established in May of 2020? I can say that you are eligible to apply for this RFP if your nonprofit has a, you have IRS certification that demonstrates that you are in fact a business. You're not a pending business. I know sometimes those 501c3s take a long time to get. So we cannot enter into a contract with somebody whose sort of tax status is pending, regardless of what that tax status is. So you have to have a FIN number or an IEN number to enter into a contract with the city of Chicago. If you do not have that number, then you really are, even if we want to contract with you, we can't. If you are waiting on a FIN number, that is not good enough. You actually have to have one. That being said, you can apply you can have like a fiscal agent and they would make the application on your behalf and you would use their FIN number and we could enter into a contract with that. So that would be how I would, so that's the answer to about, are you eligible for this RFP? Will there ever be any funding for those who specialize in serving the LGBTQ+ community? Well, like ever's a long time.
So, hi, this is Christine. All of our RFPs, we don't exclude that population. So, especially with our youth population, but we don't exclude, that population in our services that we offer. If you can provide like just more clarity on what you mean specifically, but we don't exclude the LGBTQIA population at all.
Okay, cool. Here's a little bit of housekeeping. Where will the RFP be on the DFSS website starting on May 3rd? It will not actually be on the DFSS website, although there will be links. It will be on the e-procurement website. So you'll go to City of Chicago, you'll type in a search for e-procurement, or you'll review the webinar slides, which have been posted on the DFSS website, and look for that link on the slide that I did. And that is where you will find the applications. All the applications happen in e-procurement. That's a citywide platform, not just specific to DFSS. Although maybe I like it the best. more than anybody else. But yeah, you're going to have to go to OBM's e-procurement website, and the links will be on the DFSS website, or you can call me and I'll send you a link. Did I hear it said that the special initiatives such as FIT, FIT, will continue to be funded at this time, but funds will be reduced in the near future?
No, no. The LTRA long-term rental assistance, not that program will be reduced, but not the special initiatives that were listed.
Okay. And here we operate 2 engagement services programs. Both follow the outreach model. Is submitting 1 application an option or a requirement? May we submit 2 applications if we prefer?
Yes, if you have 2 different programs, you can definitely submit 2 applications if you prefer. But if it's under 1 model, you are welcome to include both of those programs in that 1 application. But if you prefer to submit 2, please go right ahead. But you cannot go from outreach to drop in on 1 application.
And I see here that the person who asked the question about serving LGBTQ plus population meant, was there ever, do we ever think that there will be funding only for that population?
Only, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. That's something we can look into more. I don't know if you have any more information on that, but.
Right. At this time, you know, we can't forecast, you know, what special initiative opportunities might be available, but I would also encourage applicants to review all of the program models, because many of them invite applicants to apply for specific, you know, target populations, and that could include LGBTQ plus participants. I would, especially kind of in the outreach and engagement and shelter program models, allow for more of that. And so really encourage applicants to review and think through, you know, ways that the application can be used to support what you're looking to do.
Great. Now here's an awesome question. Are matching funds required for any of these RFPs?
There is an in-kind match in most of the RFPs, and that can be found laid out in the program, in the specific program models in the CDGA book.
Yes, this is true. We currently operate a family IHP. I would like to add single women in the same facility. Well, I need to do 2 applications, which would result in, if funded, 2 contracts.
Right, so this is a question under the shelter model. No, this could be 1 application under that sort of first bucket of general population, families with children, or families with children and single individuals.
Awesome. And here we are. Does DFSS anticipate an increase in available funding for year 2 to accommodate increased personnel costs resulting from the imminent minimum wage hike? Costs of living and the minimum wage have increased over the years, but there has been no commensurate increase in funding.
So our budget, the budget process happens in parallel to this application process. And so, as I mentioned earlier, and as this question asker has noted, you know, we have remained relatively level in terms of our funding. However, we do encourage you to submit applications that reflect the cost of providing your services. That helps us understand, you know, the changes from year to year, and helps in making funding and budget
budget requests.
Right. Are new applications being accepted for safe havens?
So again, with the RFP, make sure you look through it. So if you want to submit an application for a safe haven, you can do so.
Great. So I'm going to take, that was the end of the questions that we have. These are some great questions. I'm going to take a little bit of time to see if people want to ask any more questions. I can see here that there are some people with their hands up that have put a little thing on the question. I guess that's if you've already asked one. So I encourage you to type in a question. Okay, you did you did not see a response. Let's see. I'm looking for, now you see the response. Okay, great. I'm glad that you were responded to, Miss Scarlett Logan. So here, yeah, so if there's more questions. Here we go. With our program, we help them with locating housing. Can our program benefit from the rental assistance?
For the rental assistance RFP, it's for a RAP manager. So this is a lead agency who would take care of fiscal administration and so forth. So it's not just for housing location. So this is a lead agency on a higher level and not just looking, connecting to residents with housing location.
Great, awesome. So. Questions? So just to kind of fill some dead air while people are asking questions, I will say, I see there's a number of times that the link to the webinar on YouTube is going to be on the DFSS CDGA website. This webinar PowerPoint slides are going to be posted there in the next day or two with any luck. So you will have plenty of time to review the magic that has been this webinar. There you go. So that, so this this information is available to you. The FAQ documents so all of these questions are going to be put into an FAQ document with the same fantabulous answers that you got here, or in the case of the few that we need to do further research on, better answers. Those will be posted onto the website and will be attached with any luck to the applications on May 3rd when those go live, and those will go live on the eProcurement website, not the DFSS website. Let's see if there's any other questions. Here we go. So somebody is re-asking a question. We currently have 3 POs funding our shelter. Do we include the total amount of these POs in our current request?
Yes, I think I misunderstood this question earlier. So in this case, I think this is a question about sort of one program, but receiving various funding sources, and whether to include sort of the total amount of funding needed for the program in the application. So the answer is yes, please apply in your application for the sort of total amount of funding that you need to operate that program. And then sort of following funding decisions that may result in sort of multiple funding sources funding that program, but that will be sort of post RFP application. So please include sort of the total cost of services for the program that you're applying for.
Okay. And then when will the awards be announced? Maura, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So the way this process works is that applications are reviewed and funding recommendations are made as part of the city's budget process. So announcements on awards typically happens after the mayor's budget passes city council, which can be anywhere from late October to November. Once that passes, that gives the departments the go-ahead to issue award letters. So it's towards the end of 2021 when you can expect final confirmation of awards.
Perfect. Thank you. So let's see, any more questions? Questions anymore? So if these are all the questions that we have for today, I'm going to thank everybody very much for their awesome and excellent questions. I'm going to thank my completely amazing coworkers, the unsung hero, the webinar master, Mr. Thomas Mose, as well as my amazing colleagues in the Homeless Division for putting together a beautiful, beautiful PowerPoint webinar deck. I thank all of you guys for attending and asking such great questions. I don't know if anybody else has anything they would like to chime in, and go forth, do beautiful things with this day. I see it has stopped snowing, which is really what I was looking for on the end of April. If you have questions between now and May 3rd, do call the program people. If you have e-procurement questions, call or email me, or call or email the program people about your programmatic questions. They will take them down and answer them in a FAQ document. Does anybody else have anything they want to share? Okay, then I'd like to thank you all for attending this webinar and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week.